Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of Rendezvous with Anzar Saqib on CXO Global TV. CXO Global Forum is a knowledge sharing platform for all C levels across the globe. We take massive pride in contributing to the knowledge economy with our League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Ladies who are not only domain experts but key thought leaders and those people who have made a considerable amount of difference and significance in the fields that they're working in. Today, as well, we've got a very special guest with us, one of our esteemed members, Mr. Ron Thomas. He's the MD of the Strategy Focus Group based in Dubai and Singapore. Ron, thank you so much for joining us today once again.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Right. Ron, so we keep talking, and everyone's really inspired by your journey. But 1 second, how about you tell us a little more about yourself that people probably do not know about you yet? Some
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah, it's a long journey. I started my career in sales with IBM right out of university. And that was a great career. But I eventually left because my family owned a bakery. And I really wanted to do this entrepreneurial thing. And I left and went there and learned how to bake. And my plans were to take it and build it into a chain of bakeries. But it didn't work out. It didn't work out because my plans were different from my aunt and uncle's plans. And there was a clash. And eventually I went back into sales and worked and just a regular job kind of thing. And there was an opportunity to go back and work with IBM again. And this time it was in learning and development. So what I interviewed as a trainer on Microsoft Office, and I knew just enough to teach a class. And I was one chapter ahead of everybody else that was in the class. So it was kind of learning on the fly. But it was successful, and I created a brand around getting it done, taking on any assignment, learning as I go along, and would never say no to any opportunity that came up. And eventually, the branch manager, the manager who was in charge of training for the Northeast region of the U.S., got married and moved to Texas, and I was not even considering the job of taking over her role, and the regional leaders, the people that were in the so-called C-suite of that division, came to me and asked me to take it over. And I learned a lot from that because I had never turned away an assignment, whereas a lot of trainers, they wouldn't do certain things. They would only train on certain products, and I would train on anything. And because I figured if I could stay a couple of steps ahead of the people in the class, we could learn together. And they didn't know that, but it worked. And I ended up managing that division for approximately 8-9 years. And what happened was that IBM, very profit-driven, revenue-driven, we weren't meeting the targets. So as a result of that, they tried to sell it. And the other option was to just close it down. And they decided to close it down. I stayed on like 6 months, since 6 months, closing it down. And I left there and went to Martha Stewart Living in New York City. And I started as a training manager. And 9 years later, I was vice president of human resources. So again, there was a lot of opportunity. I looked at every opportunity. I looked at evidence approach to promotions because my goal was to get promoted. And every time performance evaluations came up, I had a list of successes. So I was always able to make the case, and I just rose all the way to the proverbial top, of that organization. But 9-10 years in, this was after Martha came back, because as you know, the story behind it, she went to jail, and after she came back, after she came back from jail, things changed, and I left. And I went to work for Xerox in one of their consulting practices, Talent and HR Solutions. I was the principal of that unit. And I was there for a little over a year. And I came in one day and there was an email from a search firm out of Saudi Arabia, Riyadh,
Uh-huh.
and inquiring as to whether I would want to take a role as Chief Human Resource and Administrative Officer.
Mhm.
And I applied for it. And within 6 months, I was on a flight from New York City to Riyadh. Got off the flight, it was 110 degrees. And
Wow.
yes, so, but it was a great opportunity to be an expat, which was what drove me to do that, because I wanted to kind of get out of this so-called USA bubble, and I had
Mhm.
never done work globally, and so I figured this would be an add-on to the global brand. And I stayed there for a little over a year, and someone contacted me again concerning a role here in Dubai as CEO for a great place to work. And I came
Mhm.
from Riyadh to Dubai, great place to work, CEO. And I was here for a little over a year. And when my contract came up, I got a business license and I started work. And I've been working ever since.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Yeah.
now we work out of a lot of our work is in Asia. I have a project starting tomorrow with a huge bank, global bank out of Singapore for 4 days, because we do half days, it's all virtual. Next week, I'm doing a project out of Europe. Again, that'll be evenings because of the time difference. So the vast majority of work now is virtual. I did do a project last week for a major grocery chain where we did a leadership development project
Mhm.
for that group. So it's opening up somewhat, but the vast majority of it now is based on virtual. So I look back on my career to sum all that up is that I looked for every opportunity. I had a goal in mind I just was not taking it to get a job. I'm going to take this to do this, and then I'll see what happens when I get to that point. So I was always kind of driven behind getting the next level, and the next level in a lot of cases would be a title. And that's always kind of driven me in my career. So, and I'm here now doing this, talking to you and having fun.
Sounds like an inspiring journey. But what is it that inspires you, Ron? Not just, so I'm going to do this and then I'm going to reach there. But what truly inspires you about what makes you get up every single morning and strive for that greater goal?
I had good parents. My father was a small business person. He owned real estate, owned some houses. He owned a taxi company. This was way before Uber and all of that kind of stuff, because he
Oh,
would have been
wow.
out of business now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would, in high school, I would drive taxi on the weekends. I'd take one of the cars and I'd drive taxi and drive at night to make extra money. And I always kind of worked, and I always wanted to please my parents. My mother was a housewife. So my motivation is that if they're looking down, I would want them to be proud. So that's
Wow.
always kind of something in the back of my mind. If I make a decision, what would they think about it? Would they say, "Wow, he's doing great things," or why would you do that? So that's a filter I always kind of use when I try and figure out whether I'm doing the right thing. So my grounding is, if I was to sit and talk with my father about it, what would he possibly say?
Right. Sounds amazing. And I'm sure they're very proud of you. So, Ron, your expertise are in, strategic development of human capital. Now, when we talk about human capital, most people do not, and especially those who are working with very large companies, do not see it as a big an investment, especially now with digital transformation and everything, when most men are being replaced by machines, right? So people are like, oh, we'd much rather invest in heavy mechanical infrastructure than hire the best people out there, because you can train people. So, what is your take on human capital in general, and why is it so important to businesses?
Okay, first of all, let me address the AI approach, robotics approach. I read an article a while back that for each job that would become decimated as a result of automation, 1.5 jobs will be created, 2.5 jobs will be created, because the robotics are going to have to be programmed. They're going to have to be all the things that goes with building that robotics factory.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of jobs that's going to need to be created in order to make that work. So if you think of investing in human capital, And I'm going to take it from the human resources perspective first.
Mhm.
So if we were to automate, digitize all human resources practices, and theoretically we didn't need a human resources department, well, you've got people, and as long as you've got people, you're going to have issues. That could be turnover, that could be engagement, that could be competitive pressures, and people pulling away your top talent. Every company has a strategy, but the company that maxes out on talented people will always win. So if there ever was a time to invest in leadership development, if there ever was a time to invest in a workforce, to upskill that workforce, when Amazon, I use the term roboticize their logistics centers, they saved almost $800 million. So what do? They took 700 million and invested that back into their workforce. Each worker had a budget of about $7,000, $8,000 to be upskilled. Whether, say, if you were a college student and you were studying computer science, you had $8,000 to pay for part of that. If you wanted to change your field, and you always were very good at, say, programming, but you were working there at nights, you could take that money and do that. So what they were trying to do was to give their workers additional skills so that they would be ready for this new version of workforce. Because the amount of funds that they saved as a result of that transformation, that's kind of the future of logistics centers, that's the future of warehouses. And they may not be people, but you'll always need people on the other side doing other things. So it's kind of like when cars were all of the cars, go back to horse and buggy, and then the cars come along. They still transition over. There's always been these transformations, maybe not as severe as what we're going through now, but I don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as an opportunity for people to gain new skills and keep moving along. We all are going to have to
eventually do it.
Readjust. Even leadership. One of the biggest challenges for leaders today is leading in a virtual environment. Because if I'm kind of a take charge person and I'm all virtual now, I've got to be a little more empathetic to people on the other side. Everyone is going through something if they're working from home. So that new leadership development is not around the hard skills, KPI driven, rah, rah, rah. It's about being inclusive, looking at your workers to figure out how are we working well as a team? What can we do better to increase the efficiency of this team? It's a collaborative process. The days of the so-called leader riding in on a white horse and taking charge and making all the decisions, those days are over. Yeah, and the sooner an organization or a board realizes that and start taking leaders and begin developing them. And the other key point is, as far as leadership development, start pushing it downward. If I'm a subject matter expert and my goal, I say my goal because that's important, is to be a leader, my first level of responsibility, there should be a development component. So here's the way I look at it. At each level of increasing responsibility, there must be a development component tied to that. Otherwise, you're putting people in a position. I leave on a Friday and I come back on a Monday and I work with 7 people. Now I'm in charge of 7 people, not doing my work, my subject matter expertise, but trying to motivate and trying to develop 7 people in the room. Do I have the skills to do that? If I was not developed to do it, I can possibly learn on my own. But when you think of the investment of 7 people, the salaries and the projects and all these things, how it connects, are you going to leave that to chance? Or you're going to develop people for this new so-called future of work?
There's this buzzword these days, buzz phrase, which says that people are no longer on jobs, people are doing work, right? So you don't call them jobs anymore, you call them work. What exactly is the difference between, being on a job and working?
I look at all those, nomenclatures of just, 6 or a half dozen. I think the key point is that we have to understand the people that we're working with? How are we going to develop these people? You can call them whatever you want, but I would look at them more as a partnership, because every company has a strategy, but it's the people you have and the level of talent that's going to drive that. So the key is to develop your people, hire the right people, be a brand that people want to come work for. What is the mission behind it? Try and connect all of that, and you develop, you develop, you develop. You build your own farm team, sort of a greenhouse kind of concept. Seeds come in, you water, you weed, you make sure that they're growing fertile soil, so that when you need people, you go to the greenhouse, you pull it from here, and you pluck it up, you put it over here, and you replant it here, and it blossoms here. That's the concept. And I think organizations are going to have to realize that we're going to have to spend more time investing in our people, developing our people, developing our leaders, so that as the forces of change, comes towards us, and we're trying to figure out, navigate. We have people that understand change management. We have people that understand how to lead in a virtual environment, and they just take their learnings and plop them right into this so-called equation, and they keep moving on. I think you're frozen. You're frozen. Your screen is frozen, and I can't hear what you're saying. I'm just going to send you a text.
Right. Am I back now, Ron?
Yeah, you're back now. Yeah, good. You're back now.
Yes. Right. So unfortunately, with the increasing, changes in the workforce and the company culture, there's a lot of technical issues that we face time and time
Yes.
again.
Yes.
But I think one thing I've learned is that you just need to be more agile in your approach. Just if one thing doesn't work, yeah. But Ron, another interesting thing that people keep talking about is that there's been a change in the culture at workplaces. And you keep talking about the corporate culture, you keep talking about the company culture. What exactly does that inculcate, and how can a leader make the right kind of culture for his workplace?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the leader, because the leadership drives the culture. HR does not drive the culture. HR plays a role in embedding that throughout the organization, but the leaders have to eat, breathe, and sleep the culture of the organization. And I'll give you an example of that. There was a CEO here during COVID. One of his workers, the first worker, tested positive for COVID. And they were trying to figure out, when this thing first started, they had their HR people to look at their workforce policies to make sure these people would be covered. There would be no out-of-pocket expense if anything happened. They got that squared away. They communicated to everybody, don't worry about the insurance aspect. All this is covered, blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of one thing people were kind of concerned about. And, so it was one thing less to worry about. The other component is that one of those workers contracted COVID-19. This was in the beginning, and was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, came out of the hospital, home for a week or so, and it was time for him to come back to work. Well, the word was that everyone in the store, it was a retail business, everyone in that particular store did not want to come to work because they were afraid this person was coming back in. What did the CEO do? The CEO and his leadership team came to that store that morning, and when that bus pulled up with that gentleman on there, they welcomed him into the store to tell him how proud they were of him. all of this in front of all the personnel in the store, and it just kind of let the air out of the angst that people were going through. That's what you talk about, a caring culture of an organization. And this is the same leader that on one of his calls to the all hands on call, he told people, I'm going to give you my mobile number. I don't know the answers to, I may not know the answers when you call me, but I'll find out. We're all in this together. That's what I'm talking about. Leaders that will take the stand, not a leader that gets up in a meeting and says, yeah, we're all in this together. And then you're beating someone over the head because of some minor infraction. So if you set the example, it will cascade down. And the leadership has to set the example. It doesn't matter what you have on your website, or you get up and have some slogan that you're always repeating. If you can't live it, if I can't see it, if I can't connect to it, it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
you think of layers. You think of layers on an org chart. Leader says this. That's 5 layers to go through. You ever, when you were in school, they had this little game you'd play. You whisper in somebody's ear over here, and it goes around the room. And when it comes out on this side, it's totally different than what was said over here. That happens in organizations. And the filter is every level. If I say here what we're going to do, it gets here, it may be watered down somewhat. As that keeps going down to the latter person on the totem pole, it means absolutely nothing.
Right. So, but a lot of leaders, and since I keep talking to them, they oftentimes have difficulty interacting with everybody from their organization, right? Because you can do that with a smaller company or a startup, but when you're running a big MNC, FMCG, it is hard for you to remember everybody's name or connect with them on a personal level.
Yeah, that's hard to do, but the thing is that why couldn't you set up once every 3 weeks you go to one of your sites and you have coffee with everyone in the plant? Or you stop by in the afternoon and there's the ice cream truck that comes by, and someone did this. The ice cream truck comes by and the CEO and the leadership teams comes by and they have ice cream on a hot day and they sit around and talk with people and then they leave. These are the kind of things, they don't teach you this when you go through leadership development. It's kind of an offshoot, but how do you feel as a person and how do you connect with people? All these statements and sending out emails and you saying these things, if you don't live that, it's not going to get done. So I don't care how many offices you have. You figure out a way to get to them and spend an hour. That 1 hour, the ROI from that 1 hour will supersede anything else you're going to do. And if that's kind of a known way that we do it here, why do we do it? We do it here because we care about our people and we know people are going through a lot and we want to make sure they hear it from me because I'm at the top of the food chain.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
That's not hard to understand. I always post these quotes. And one of the things I always end it with, it's not complicated. Treat people the way that you would want to be treated. Recognize people the way that you would want to be recognized.
Absolutely. I did read somewhere that, people will always forget what you did for them, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
That's exactly right.
Right. But when we talk about companies, fair enough, you connect with your internal organization and everyone that's a part of it. But what about collaboration these days? Because I've often seen that once people do escalate in the corporate ladder, they also become a bit insecure and they're hesitant on collaboration. Have you noticed that?
Well, I look at it this way. I think one of the filters that we're going to have to look at, and this was done in a study years ago, it was called Project Oxygen, that Google ran back in. Project Oxygen, they did it in 2008. They did a recap in 2016. And one of the things they talked about was that they realized that a lot of the people that were in management as supervisors or whatever should never have been there in the first place. So they were promoting technical leaders. as opposed to a technical leader, but had a huge EQ side. You know, they were people. And those people were highly rated as managers. So, you know, we all suffer imposter syndrome. I don't care how high you get. Sometimes it kind of comes through, am I all that, or whatever that question could be. We all suffer from that. But you find a way to, you know, get around that. And the easiest way I've always told people when I'm doing leadership development, the most important phrase that you can ever mention to your team is, I don't know. I don't know, but let's all put our heads together and try and figure it out. And stop and move away from being the answer person. Everyone comes to me, I give you the answer. And I'm just giving out answers all day. Well, you're not developing your people when you do that. So it comes like, you come to me with a problem. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Come back to me tomorrow, think it through, because it was well laid out, and come back to me with some possible solutions, and then we'll talk. Because I want you to begin developing your sense of your views, your insight may be better than mine. No one says just because I have a title or a couple of initials after my name, that doesn't mean I have more brains than you have, and you could just be a worker on the floor. But you may have some insights on something that I've never been exposed to. So I want to hear your side of it. What do you think we should do? And then you and I will work together. That's what collaboration is about. And you open that up in a team, or you open that up one-to-one, and you can also open it up one-to-many, in other words, as a team, and we build it from there. So here's how COVID looks, or looked. I see organizations that are saying on July 1st, I want everyone back. And my first question is, I wonder, do they poll or focus group the workers? Because if you're sitting in some ivory tower and saying, I want everybody back in the office on July 1st, well, you know what? Maybe 80% of your workforce wants a hybrid model. So if you force them to come back in at 100%, you're going to lose key people. So the operative way to work this new workforce is to get their insights. We're in the process of trying to figure out how we're going to make the new work model. Give us your ideas on hybrid working, on days into the office. Give us your insights as to what would work for you. If you compile all that information, all of those data points, you can come up with a solution that's going to hit bullseye. But if I sit in an office with all my so-called smart people and come up with a solution that's going to affect the entire workforce, I'm going to miss it.
Makes sense. Ron, you've shared some amazing insights with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future as well. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left for today's show, but there are a couple of things that I know people would enjoy knowing about you on a personal front. So, you know, everybody sees you as this, senior management and HR consultant, and you've really hit it big. But who are you in your free time? What is it that you enjoy doing?
So I don't really look at it as free time. I look at refocus time. So refocus time for me, and I mentioned this to you earlier, COVID kind of got me back into, I was a gym rat before this. I go to the gym every morning at 6 o'clock and 6 till 7, a little after 7. So when the gyms closed, I started walking. And now I've gotten into walking, and I leave my house at 5 a.m. and I walk until 7 or a little after I'm going to say 5 days out of a week. And to make that interesting is I take photos that I post on Facebook, Instagram, and I call it the daily walkabout. And this to inspire people, daily walkabout. And it's to inspire people, get up and do something. Don't just sit and stew in whatever you're thinking about, and someone says, oh my God, I could never get up that early. I said, well, whatever time you go. I don't say you have to get up at 5 o'clock. It works for me because I want quiet. There's no traffic, and there's normal people going to work, getting the bus, getting the metro. And from doing this since we got released from lockdown, you see the same people every morning. So you say, good morning. Hey, how are you today? And it creates kind of a community every time I go outside. So that's my kind of me time. I call it Ron time, every 5 days a week. And it works for me. Everyone has to figure out what works for them. It could be the gym. It could be a whole host of things. But do something and get off of these couches and these chairs that you're sitting around, laying in the bed, looking at the ceiling, worrying about something.
Right. That's something that I know a lot of us are guilty of.
Yes.
But Ron, thank you for your time. In the end, I'd like to ask you, what do you think is the utility of forums like CXO Global? What kind of benefit have you derived from it?
The camaraderie of levels of discussion. You know, everyone is sharing, and this is collaboration in its truest form. Everyone is sharing. Sometimes somebody will share something appropriate, and they're called out, but it's cool. Everybody's cool, and it's kind of like when I get up in the morning, it's the first WhatsApp group I check to see what's out there, see who posted what. Okay, cool. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to come back and respond to this later, or if something comes across from my side, I'm going to take that and I'm going to post it into the group, see what people think, you know, because you never know what's going to resonate with somebody. The story I just told on the walking, if that turns one person to get up in the morning and do something, I've done my job. Or we've all done our job. So you never know where it's going to come from.
Amazing. Thank you so much for making our morning that much more inspiring, Ron. We look forward to hearing from you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was it for today. And we hope to hear more from you in the feedback, in the comments. And if you want to learn more about what Ron does, we've shared some links in our description here. Up until next time, here's me signing off.